everyone, and welcome once again to Health and Family. Today, we revisit SCARS, a program designed to assist individuals while helping us to identify children who are experiencing sexual abuse at the hands of some adults. Joining us to talk about this topic is none other than the founder of SCARS, Mrs. Debbie Ray Rivers. We thank you, Mrs. Rivers, for joining us. Welcome to Health and Family once again. So I specifically did not mention the what SCAR stands for, so we can start from there. But before we do that, give us a brief accounting of how SCARS came to be.
Yes, I'm happy to be here, and I thank you so much for the invitation. Yes, SCAR stands for Saving Children and Revealing Secrets, and it is not a coincidence that today, October 27th, 2021, it's SCAR's 10th anniversary. So we were
Wow.
granted our charitable status 10 years ago today, October 27th, 2011.
Congratulations. Congratulations. This community has certainly benefited from SCAR. So before we get to how much of an impact you've made on our community, how do we define child sexual abuse?
Well, child sexual abuse is any sexual act between an adult and a minor, or between two minors when one exerts power over the other person. So forcing, coercing, or persuading a child to engage in any type of sexual act. But it also can include non-contact acts. It can include exhibitionism, which is exposing one's genitals on purpose to cause sexual interest. It can be taking pictures of a child's genitals. It can be showing pornography to a child, watching a child undress, or even asking children to touch themselves or others can be considered child sexual abuse. Exposure to pornography, voyeurism. This is spying on and getting arousal from looking at others' private parts, like, remember the term peeping Tom.
Right.
So those are some definitions of child sexual abuse. So one thing we know, it causes harm to children.
Without a doubt. So speaking of which, some children, for you're going to tell us the reason why, some children that have been interfered with prefer not to discuss what has happened to them. And tell us about that.
Right. So first thing I want to start with is I think we have to change the word interfere. Because interfere, if you look that up in the dictionary, in any type of dictionary, it certainly doesn't mean sexual abuse. And I think, and I used that term for years until I really educated myself on this issue. And I realized that we're minimizing the impact sexual abuse makes when we call it interfering. So I don't like to use that word, but I did use it for years because that's
Right.
what it felt like. It's interfering in a child's life, but it's also a lot deeper than that. And many times children won't tell. They won't tell, maybe perhaps out of fear. How will my family survive if this person pays for our groceries? If this person is always taking care of me because one of my parents works, or what happens if I tell and one of my parents harms this person or kills them and then has to go to jail? What if I
Right.
lose a parent for telling? So fear can be one of the reasons why a child might tell. A child might not tell because they're confused. Sometimes children don't even understand it's wrong. They might know it feels good, but they're confused. Like, why does this feel good? And
When
yet
I know it shouldn't, right?
when I
Yeah.
know it shouldn't, right?
Uh,
Is this even normal? Sometimes they
right.
don't understand that till they get older. Sometimes a child doesn't tell, Dawn, because they feel guilty. The
Mm,
perpetrator, the person who's harming him, tell them that they deserve it, that they like it, that they wanted it, that they caused it. So it may bring guilt. So then that might silence a child. A child might not tell out of shame. There's something about sexual abuse that's very shameful, and sexual trauma is very shameful for a survivor. It's very silencing. There could be some unfounded guilt that causes that shame. So there are many reasons why children won't and don't tell.
so you think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the childhood sexual abuse goes unreported until maybe the child has now grown up and is an adult and says, something was really wrong. I should not have had to go through that. If you could talk on that for a minute.
You're absolutely right. Most cases do go unreported because of the
Mhm.
reasons that we just talked about: guilt, shame, fear, confusion. Perhaps, it's not reported because they're people who care for them and love them. Their caretakers don't want to put children through further trauma. Going through the journey of prosecution can be traumatizing. Maybe they don't want someone who they know and trust and other people love and care about go to jail. So they may not report it because they know that might be one of
Right.
the outcomes. Um, Perhaps they have some unfounded shame as a parent or a caregiver themselves for not protecting the child. And so then they wonder, will the child be taken from me if I report this?
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people know that not every person who harms children, sexually harms children, goes to jail. So then they say, why bother?
Right.
If there's
Yeah.
not going to be a conviction, I'm going to put my family through all this trauma for what reason?
Right.
And so
So,
those are some of the reasons.
yeah. Is there a statute of limitations on when a person can report a sexual abuse case, or is it, after 5 years, don't worry about it?
No, we should be very grateful to our legislators and our advocates in this community from years ago, long before SCARS, many years ago,
Mm-hmm.
who were responsible for writing the law that there is no statute of limitations in Bermuda to report a historical case of sexual abuse.
So if it happened to a child that was 10 and the person is now 40, that's 30 years down the road, they can, and the perpetrator is still alive, or does it make a difference? The perpetrator would need to be alive, or even, what do you
I
think?
I believe the perpetrator does need to be alive, but you might want to check with
The law on,
with the
yeah.
law with our AG chambers on that. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay.
There's nobody
To convict, yeah.
to convict, or and there's nothing to defend. I mean, or no one to defend themselves. So
Right.
I don't think that's possible, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Right. So I actually took the SCARS training. This is, I believe, the third time I've taken it. And for some reason,
Okay.
the question that kept coming in my mind, because it was the beginning of the school term, and the question that kept coming in my mind was a situation where there was a former Miss Bermuda, Miss Bermuda, excuse me, a former Miss America, right? Was her name Marilyn
Marilyn Vanderburg.
Okay. So I remember she was Miss America 1954, if I'm correct in saying that. And so she had been sexually abused, and we're actually going to watch a little videotape of that after the break. But I just wanted to set it up because what had happened, um, she claimed she was sexually abused by her dad, and her mom, from the way I was interpreting the situation, her mom basically allowed it because her mom knew when the father was going to the young lady's room to have sex with her. And the question that kept coming to my mind, and no, I'm not a pre-law student or anything of that nature or a lawyer, but my question was, why wasn't that individual, the mom, being persecuted for being an enabler? And that kept sticking to me because it irritated me, because I felt, the father was without a doubt wrong, but what about the mother? So anyway, we'll
And
take a look at that. Go ahead.
yeah, it raises a question: why are those who do not report sexual abuse and have that knowledge held to account? Are there any
Right.
consequences for those who know and do nothing? Because doing nothing is an action. And I don't know in Bermuda of anyone held responsible for not reporting child sexual abuse, being
Hmm.
fined, or there any consequence, and held accountable for not reporting. It is something to think about.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering if that would make a difference. So unfortunately, we're going to hear some sirens. I'm at home doing Zoom, and so that goes with the territory. So apologize for that. We're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about that video Miss America, Marilyn what was her last name?
Vanderburg.
Vanderburg. All right. And she talks about her experience as a person that was molested by her dad.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy! And refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodsafety.org.
And we thank you for coming on back. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Mrs. Debbie Ray Rivers from SCARS. And prior to the break, we were talking about Mrs. Marilyn Vanderburg, who was a Miss America from the 50s. And I was telling Mrs. Debbie Ray Rivers that I actually remember that interview from Phil Donahue. That's a name from the past. And she was talking about the sexual abuse she suffered under her father, and how her mom knew that the father was going to the child's room and having his way with her, and she basically enabled it. And I was really incensed about that. And then so we're going to take a look at that, and so we'll continue on. So stay tuned for that.
My mother walked down the hallway one night. I was about 11 or 12, and my father always came in late at night. Late meaning 10, 11, sometimes midnight. And he'd been in my room for maybe a half hour, and all of a sudden I heard footsteps coming down. I could hear the first step, and then the second step, very, very, very slowly, and then the third step. And she was now about 12 feet from my door. And I waited to hear another step. And it was a dramatic moment when everything stopped for all three of us. All three of us knew exactly what each one of us was thinking and knew. It's the only time I ever felt my father afraid. He just stopped. And I thought, it's going to be over. She's going to come in. And we waited for that dramatic moment. And then I heard a step up the steps and up the steps and up the steps. And I knew she would never come through that door. And I knew she would never, ever come to help me. Do I believe she knew? Absolutely. I had a reporter say to me, "Did your mother know?" And I said, "It went on in our home for 18 years. And the reporter said, "But did your mother know?" And I said, "It went on in our home for 18 years. Would you know if something went on in your home for 18 years? Of course she knew. Did she repress it? Is that how I learned to dissociate? Maybe. Maybe. Maybe she just couldn't deal with it, so she just put it somewhere and wouldn't think about it. But I do believe she made a decision. I believe she made a choice, and she didn't choose me.
I was so impressed at her poise. I mean, obviously she was a Miss America, but she just was able to tell her story without any shame, and that will certainly go a long way. So, Ms. Rivers, what are the characteristics of a child molester? Because this was her father, Marilyn Vanderburg's father, that was actually sexually abusing her.
Well, that is a testament that a sex offender can be anyone, sadly. A child sex offender looks and acts just like everyone else. They can be well-liked. They can be respected. They are the best at what they do. Her father was well respected in his community. You know, child sex offenders, I always say they don't walk around with a sign on their forehead
Right.
that reads, you know, I have sexual thoughts of children. A sign like that would indicate who they really are. It would indicate what they really believe to be true, that using children to gain sexual pleasure is permissible. So there are no physical characteristics that would stand out, Dawn. It's behavioral things that we must look out for, because a sex offender can be anyone. Sex offenders knows, child sex offenders, it doesn't discriminate, doesn't, you know, a sex offender doesn't go to a specific church, doesn't look a specific way, doesn't have a specific job, you know, doesn't believe in a certain thing, isn't educated or not educated. A sex offender can be anyone, can be a male or a female, those that harm children. But we need to really focus more on behavioral things rather than the physical aspects of a sex offender. So someone who pushes for isolated one-on-one time with children, you know, that
i.e.,
i.e., you know, I want to be behind the closed door where somebody's not going to see, or, you know, lock that door, or pushing to always be, you know, really enjoys being around children more than even adults, is pushing to be with a child more than being, you know, being around another adult, perhaps, you know, not respecting a child's boundaries, you know, seductive back rubs, you know, foot rubs, you know, tickling them around their genitals, you know, someone who loves those strong, forceful frontal hugs and holds on to a child, you know, look out for those little red
Yeah.
flags, always buying them, you know, gifts,
yeah,
grooming them, you know,
that's the
these are
little
all,
carrot.
yeah, exactly. And these are red flags.
Mhm.
They're very manipulative. They know what they're doing. They don't want to get caught. So they take their time. But, you know, a sex offender can be anyone.
Yeah, I can just imagine, because I was thinking the example that came to my mind, because we've heard of coaches that have been sexual offenders, so i.e., you know, it's a baseball game and there's a coach and he will say, well, baseball practice will be over at 5 o'clock, literally, and then, but you can come at 6 o'clock. That should be a major, major red flag, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, looking for those opportunities to have that isolated one-on-one time. You know, and pushing for that, because that's their interest. That's what they want. They want that time alone. They're not going to do this in front of other people. It's their shame. It's a
Right.
secret. It's, you
So
know, so they're going to look for those isolated one-on-one situations.
So parents or caregivers just have to be very, very diligent. So if practice is over at 5 o'clock, the example we use, you be there at maybe 5 to 5 or something to that nature to
Yes.
combat. Yeah.
And the responsibility is on all of us. It's not just the parent or the child. It's also on the organization where children frequent,
Mhm.
making sure that, you know, you have that rule of three. You have two adults waiting for with the children at the end of that match, at the end of that baseball game. You know, always making sure that it's observable and interruptible. You know, those are the things that we teach in our training. It's everybody's responsibility.
So I want us to go back to the victim and talk about, because this is a harrowing experience by anybody's standards. How do they begin to start to the healing process to come, because I can imagine the guilt and shame that an individual will feel, you know?
Absolutely. We have something on our website called Imagine, and it's a picture of a little girl, and you open it up and it talks about imagine being a child who's been abused. You know, healing is different for everyone. It's a
Yeah.
different journey for everyone. No one can tell anyone when to heal, but we do know that healing is possible. I believe that a victim can begin the healing process by revealing the truth, by getting it out,
It makes a big
talking to somebody.
difference.
It really does. You know,
Mhm.
all that stuff sits on inside of us, and it stays inside, and we can begin to heal when we reveal it and when we let it out. You know, understanding as a survivor of sexual abuse that what happened was not our fault. I'm a survivor. You know that, and
Right.
you know, I had to understand as I went through my journey of healing that what happened to me was not my fault. That I did nothing wrong. I did not cause this. Believing in also in the fact that I can heal, that healing is possible, that sexual abuse is not love. It just isn't. When somebody violates a child's body, that is not love.
True.
Sex is between two consenting adults. It was never
Right.
meant to be for children. Believing that we are worthy, we are important. What someone did to us does not measure our worth. I don't look at myself and identify myself as that anymore. I've broken those walls of shame because what happened to me was not my fault, and it does not identify me. And another thing that really helps with the healing process is support. Support is key for a survivor because triggers will happen. There are
Right.
certain things that happen in our life that will
Yeah.
trigger us back to that pain. And so we need the right support in our life for someone who, and people around us that understand us and that can help us through that journey.
So as you mentioned in the beginning, this program is 10 years old, specifically today. So congratulations again on that. I'm looking at your title, and you have that as your backdrop. The revealing secrets part has got to be one of the big things a victim can do, as you said, to come to terms with what's happened and to be able to move on. Is that what you tell some of your clients that come to for assistance, or?
Well, we really don't have clients, but we do have those adults in the community who know, the journey of scars and the fact that, that we advocate for those that have been abused, and we promote healing. And we do have a lot of survivors in our country. We do. And our program, I believe our training has resonated with our community. I know thousands have shared their pain and their story with me. It's in the thousands in 10 years, I can tell you that. It's hundreds and hundreds, 5 years ago. It's really in the thousands now. And I think this message has resonated with the community because sexual abuse was so silent for so many generations.
Yeah.
We were putting it under a rug. We weren't talking about it. We were minimizing it. We were not understanding the traumatic effect that this had on us as adults. And what happens when children are abused, there is trauma. And if you look at the very first interview I did many years ago, I said, I read my script because I was not, I wasn't comfortable being in front of a camera and I had to read, but, it said, I said, where do we think pain goes? And children
Good
who are abused,
question.
it causes pain. Now we use this word trauma. It causes trauma and it
Right.
has to go somewhere. And it affects every child differently. But I think SCARS has resonated with our community. And that's not because of me as the founder or the reason that we started it, or it's because of all of us. Our community is a community that is not in denial. We have taken this subject and we have said, and this topic, and we said, yes, this happens. And yes, we realize the damage it has caused. And we now have a prevented oriented, if that makes sense, community.
Yes. Yeah. So another question that came up during the training was, is SCARS training, is that mandatory to a certain extent, or is it with a certain segment? I know that was one of those touchy subjects, touchy questions, but if you could just shed some light on it for us.
Sure. Well, many of our wonderful youth serving organizations in our community, those who care and are responsible for children, are mandating prevention education. They are now mandating it. There is a law through the vulnerable persons policy for charities, and those who take care of the vulnerable must have policies in place. And that vulnerable person policy came a few years ago, and we're grateful for that. We want that to go beyond vulnerable person policy, and for any organization, any private organization who's responsible for children, should really mandate prevention education. Why wouldn't they? It's free. It's free education. And it's a great thing. And it means, what it will mean is more eyes on our children. But I can tell you that many youth serving organizations in our community have already done this. Bermuda is leading the way in prevention.
Fantastic.
And we have been told that by the leading sexual abuse prevention organization in the United States, Darkness to Light. So our organizations are doing it. We'd love to see it mandated by law. But yeah, it's happening already.
All right. Unfortunately, our time is very precious, like 30 seconds. So this is a question that I wanted to ask. If sexual abuse is suspected, what should one do? And we will finish off with that question.
call the Department of Child and Family Services, 278-9111.
Just-
Up 278-9111. They are the agency in Bermuda that you call for, and let them do the investigation. When you make a report, you're not making an accusation. You're asking
Okay.
for an investigation to take place. Obtain the name there, obtain their email address, and follow up in writing. Be relentless when you make a report, until you're satisfied with that outcome. Find somebody there at Child and Family Services who's going to be your advocate, and continue to communicate with them until a result has been achieved. You can also call the vulnerable unit of the police, 211 or 295-0011, because harming children's against the law. And that
Bottom
and
line. Yeah.
the police can be called as well.
All right. Thank you so much. So while it's been the second time we are hosting a program on this topic, it is imperative that if you have not signed up to take this workshop on this topic, and that you do so as soon as possible. It will leave you better prepared to deal with the steps to defeat childhood sexual abuse. For further information on this topic, you can email Helen, HELEN, @scars.bm, or call 297-2277. Let's do everything in our power to protect children's innocence. They deserve that much. I'm Shay Dawn Burgess, and this has been Health and Family.